Welcome to the RegenBiome podcast. Hi, I'm your host, Gene Felix Turcotte, a certified integrative health practitioner, level 1 and 2, certified in blood chemistry and functional lab testing. I love helping people with GI issues, weight loss, mold exposure, heavy metals, mysterious problems, and health optimization. I love helping people get to the root cause of their health struggles and simplify healing. Ready to transform your health? Go to RegenBiome.com and click book a call. All the support is greatly appreciated. If you enjoy, please write a 5-star review on iTunes or the platform of your choice. Enjoy the podcast and please share this with anyone that this would help. Welcome back to the RegenBiome podcast. On today's episode, as promised, I was going to share my experience of appendicitis, which recently happened just over about 5 weeks ago. And I wanted to take the time. I did a little bit of research as well. And I also wanted to report my recovery. And so before jumping on an episode, I wanted to also, go through this process myself. And I thought it would be really helpful for a lot of people. As for myself, I went through this journey on my own. And from the ER, from the time that I called the 811 number, which if you are in the United States, I don't know if you guys do have the same, but in Canada, most places have this number where you can call and you can speak to a nurse. So this is exactly what I did, but I'm going to go through my experience from my place, from leaving home all the way to the hospital, to the ER, and my whole process. And I'm going to be addressing self-advocacy. So how can you self-advocate for yourself, especially in this place or time that is pretty stressful, and to really navigate the healthcare system as it was. It's not an easy task for a lot of people. This is why I think it is so important to learn and to try to understand. And I think as we're moving through 2025, it is really important, and this is one of the things that I really want to emphasize and encourage people to really anchor inside their body, is to understand that you have this inner intuition that your body knows, and you can trust yourself and make the right decision for you. And yes, we use outside sources to quantify, to help us make a decision, but at the same time is, how does it feel in your body? Get out of your head and get it inside our body. It's really important, especially in those situations. And again, this is non-medical advice. And in many cases, appendicitis can be something severe for so many people. But again, we always hear the horror story, or the person that got there, it was about to explode, da da da. And so for me, it's like, I will not anchor into fear. I want to be promoting proactiveness with people. And so I hope you find a lot of value in this. But let's get started in this episode, and we'll dive in. So first thing, this happened pretty suddenly. So it was in the middle of the night. So the pain started really mid-afternoon. I was just feeling a little bit of lower right pain onto my lower right abdomen, and just a little hickiness, like nothing severe or whatnot. And so in some cases, oftentimes myself, and I started getting a little bit distension in my lower abdomen. And sometimes, times of stress or whatnot, this is where I call the fleet enema. So I would do some enemas and thought potentially could be some constipation. And so I felt a little bit bloated. But it was not like crazy uncomfortable until I went to bed. So I was like, man, this is really weird. But I just thought, maybe I'm just gonna do an enema and I'll be fine. And so after doing a coffee enema, pain, and obviously there was like evacuation and everything. So I was like, like we're pretty cleaned up. And so I did a second water enema as well, just to make sure that everything was really out. But then again, I was like, okay, this felt kind of weird. I still felt a little bit of pain, and so I decided to let's go to bed. I went to and I was trying to find like a comfortable position that it was not like painful, and then it just I just started to get this like sharper pain and to my lower right abdomen where the appendix is, which actually I had no idea. I didn't even come across my mind because that's not something that I really heard before in my surrounding and people, but I also know that some of my friends have had their appendix, like one friend in particular had her appendix removed as a kid, teenager, but it already burst for her. So it was like probably like a really nightmare, you know. So I didn't know. So anyways, after trying all the tools and the gadgets that I had, like my hem coil and PEMF and everything, right? I was like, well, okay, so it was uncomfortable. It was almost like 2 o'clock and it was 1:30 in the morning. I was like, so I made a phone call, called the 811 number, and I described all my pains and symptoms. So this is why, if you feel any, so and I'll go through some of the common signs and symptoms of a potential appendicitis. Again, non-medical advice, and always seek medical attention in any cases when you feel like, I didn't want to be like um, the hero and just trying to save myself from everything. There's a time and a place for some help with the medical system, and that was the right time for me. So, and I made a phone call. She was like, get to the ER. So I don't drive. So I said, so okay, I'm gonna be responsible. So I called it Uber, got a Uber, got a hop in, and got myself to the ER. But some common signs and symptoms about with appendicitis, there could be sudden pain that begins on the right side of the lower abdomen or around the navel, and it shifts to the lower right abdomen. So again, you can also have pain that worsens with movement, coughing, or sneezing, or when you're actually flexing your this one thing I was reading, your knees towards yourself. So that could be painful. Nausea, vomiting, or loss of appetite, which one thing that I came across was anorexia, which was really interesting actually. So these are kind of some signs and symptoms: fever or chills, constipation or diarrhea, abdominal bloating, or feeling of fullness. Lower abdomen was kind of a bit of what was happening to myself. So hospital, get to the ER after getting into the Uber. And so basically right away, they got me. My pain was I would say probably 9 out of 10, 10 out of 10. It was painful. It was really uncomfortable. And it was getting really late. I was exhausted. I was pretty tired by then. So they got me to do blood work right away. So obviously, with my background with functional blood chemistry, it came really handy. So I have a few experience with phlebotomies. I don't do them myself. I would never do it. But with phlebotomists myself, I had a lot of experience. And so a little story. So not to freak anybody out, but it was quite interesting because as this happened to me multiple times before, when phlebotomists start to try to find my veins, but I on my right arm actually, so I do have some finicky veins that are around tendons, and so some phlebotomists have difficulties at times, especially on that arm. So this is what happened. So got the needle in. She just started wiggling it around. I'm like, just take it out because I know I'm gonna faint, and that's exactly what happened. So she was like, which was the first time actually that was really interesting. So she's like, keep breathing, keep your eyes open, keep breathing. And I was just like literally I felt like on a little cloud. I had like dizzy, brain foggy, and I was just like, whoa, like, and then the heat starts rushing up to your brain and you feel like really zoned out and completely not there, like you're passing out. So, and the first thing I got to the ER, I was like, can I get a stretcher? Can I have a bed or on a stretcher? She's like, no, there's none available. So anyway, got myself one by fainting. So I was able to lay down. And so I found myself that when they put me on a stretcher actually and start tilting because they actually tried to put get more blood towards my brain by elevating my feet. So this is what they did on the stretcher, which was great. Actually, it relieved some pain. So that was really interesting. So anyways, next thing, so my blood count came back, and as I met the doctor and I asked, so what were my white blood cell counts? So this is one of the first things, right? So I asked, because I was like, well, if I do have an actual infection, my white blood cell count, so in the functional range, when I look at a client's blood work, we want the white blood cell count between 3.5 to 6. So this is the optimal ranges. This is where, and even like 3.5, I'm still gonna look at patterns as far as like, do we have immunodeficiency? Things like people with mold sometimes can have a tendency toward low white blood cells as well too, which is a potential issue for a lot of people, or autoimmunity. But so my white blood cell count was at 13. So I was like, well, hello, I know. And conventional ranges would normally be between, I think it goes from 3.5 all the way up. Yeah, 3.5 all the way up to like about 11 or 10 in some cases, depending if you're in Canada or United States. And so mine were at 13. So I was like, okay, I do have an infection. So I asked the breakdown of my white blood cells. So your white blood cells has the breakdown of the types of white blood cells, or your fighters, right? So you have your neutrophils, which are more bacteria that fights more bacteria, your lymphocytes, that's a bit more viruses, and then and other issues. And then you have your monocytes as well too, and then you have your eosinophils, which is more, histamine response or parasitic issues, basophils, which that's when we have actual inflammation in the tissue, and so or histamine response or allergies. Potential like sometimes high monocytes, eosinophils, and basophils. It's a common pattern when they're all three are elevated in cases of like things like parasites, but it does not always mean that. But so in my case, I was like, okay, so we got a bacterial infection. There's something going on, right? So, and then when the doctor came, this is when she pressed on my lower right abdomen, and I just bounced. I was like, oh my God, this is painful. She's like, I'm thinking it's your appendix. I was like, okay. So, but I couldn't get in for a CT scan. So that was the next step. First, I had some pain. So number one, how can you self-advocate for your treatment? So the first thing that for me, is I try to take the least of things that I can as much as possible. It was about a 10-year past experience that I've been in the hospital since I had my mononucleosis back in 2014. So it was a long time ago. And 2019, that's really when I had my arm infection. For some of those of you that might not know, so I had this like all these wounds were spreading on my left arm, which was like wild. And so that was kind of a scary time that got me into this health in the health space in the first place. But so I knew I had an infection. So I was like, okay, that's good. But then they wanted to give me painkillers. So they gave me Toradol. So I asked, number one, what is it? Uh, they offered me morphine, which was super interesting. I was like, okay, no, like I don't need more, I don't need um, that much help. So they gave me Toradol, and there was another one that was I can't remember what it was. My goodness. I think it was an NSAID. Think it was an anti-inflammatory. Oh no, sorry. So it was actually for nausea, which I didn't have nausea. So I actually refused that because I was like, well, I'm not nauseous. I don't need that. So I declined that one, but I took a Toradol, which is more anti-inflammatory. And so it helped a lot because I needed to get some sleep. So I was like, cool, I'll take that. So they did an IV, not IV, but just a injection. So that was quick and easy. So they did that. And then they gave me fluids as well too. I requested, so can I have like a bag of fluids as well too? So a little bit of saline just to help me out and keep me hydrated. So this is one thing that I ask first. And then also I asked what were also my other blood markers. So my CRP was not high actually yet. So C-reactive protein, which is a blood biomarker that is great for acute inflammation. So which normally will be elevated in the first 24 to 48 hours. This is really when it happens. And it actually was pretty low. I think it was 5, which is still above optimal ranges, but it hasn't got to its peak yet until the next day. And so I had to come back later on. I had my appointment booked for about 11:30 in the morning. I had to come back to the hospital again so I could get my CT scan, which for those of you who've never got a CT scan, so basically what happened, it's like you look like it's this big donut shaped thing that you go in. There's some radiation that comes out of it. And this is something that I've learned also. They don't overdo them because it's not like if you have appendicitis, number one, the next step normally is surgery right away. So they don't even retest you or rescan. So But I'll get down to that, what you can do after as a follow-up, and what I did myself. And so I went back to the hospital, got my CT scan, and I had to go back to emergency to get my results. And so I just walked over, but in the whole experience, when they inject you, I had this IV in my arm, um, and they inject you with this imaging liquid, so it's um, so that they can actually see, and you get this feeling of a flushing feeling. It's not like when you take a bunch of vitamin B3 niacin, but somewhat kind of felt a little bit like this. I had this like flushing up my head kind of. But normally you can have this feeling of like if you're peeing yourself on the table, but it was not the case. So I didn't feel that much, but some people do. So as they report, and that was the one thing that they tell yourself. It's pretty quick. CT scan, it lasts for like just a couple minutes. It's really, really quick. It's not long at all. And then there's this, not robot or person that they tell you how to breathe. So you have to breathe. And anyways, so I did that. Result came back. By the time I got back to the emergency room, the waiting was about like 5.5 hours. It was crazy. So then I was like, well, I'm just here for my results. So the nurse actually took a look, and kind of like the look on her face. She gives me this orange tag, and I'm like, what is this? So she's like, yeah, well, I'm gonna get you to um and she was basically trying to tell me, like, telling me, are you reading between the lines of like, oh, this is like serious? I was tired, and I was like, oh, it kind of got me like a little bit anxious after this. I was like, okay. So I went through through the not ER department, right away to on the other side, and to another desk where they took me in to see the surgeon doctor right away. She's like, oh, and the nurse, the thing is, and they all mean well, and all departments in hospital, people really operate differently. And this nurse was super sweet, super nice, but she was like type A, very like into her masculinity. And she's like, "Oh, you'll be fine. It's a quick surgery." I was like, "What surgery? Like, what are you talking about?" So, anyways, and the thing is, quickly, and the one thing she was saying, normally how they treated back then appendicitis was with just antibiotics, and they just stopped doing it, and now it's a common thing, which is it's a very, very common surgery. I think one in the top five surgery. And from what I quickly look online as well too, was about like in Canada, it's about like a $6,000 surgery. In the US, it could go between from the 10,000 up to the upper 35,000, depending if you're getting actual the amount of time you're spending in the hospital from being overseen or whatnot. And so it can really fluctuate. So I'm all about transparency. And so there's a lot of money in surgery as well too. And I will not say you should deny a surgery at all whatsoever, because in some cases, yeah, if your appendix is about to explode, that could be a lot of issue, lead to like full-blown sepsis and infection, and then you could die. Like, but it also, this is the only story that we're telling people that most people know, and people freak out. And I'm like, wait a minute. So I didn't want to get myself into this state of fear, which is so easy. I was by myself, I was alone, but at least with the baggage that I have in my knowledge that I was self-equipped, I was like, I wanted to ask all the questions and all my options. So by the time I got to see the surgeon doctor, literally OR was already ready. She's like, you have to make your decision within the next 10 minutes because OR is waiting for you. So I was like, whoa, wait a minute. Wait a minute. Settle down. Let's ask these questions. So I ask her number one. So this is the one thing. You are entitled of asking all your questions. I don't care how long it takes to ask your doctor. I don't care, right? Number one. I wanted to know what was my state. So my appendix the size was 12 millimeter. Normal appendix size is between 6 to 8 millimeter. So this is what the surgeon doctor told me. So I was like, okay, number one. So is it about to burst? She's like, no. Okay, number two, do I have full-blown sepsis? She's like, no. Okay, number three, am I about to die? Or like, is it about to go sideways? She's like, no. Okay, perfect. So I want to know all my options. So option one, the least invasive, and option two, the most invasive, which was surgery. So I was like, okay, so option two, tell me about the surgery. What does that look like? And the few things she said, so it's pretty quick and easy surgery. And again, my grandmother got her appendix removed at 10 years when she was 10, and she's 81 years old. So obviously the risk of this surgery is very, very low, but it can happen. And there's risk of reinfection as well too. There's risk of potential bleeding, and there's multiple different risks in this surgery. So, but also, there's the risk that if you don't do this per se, this is what according to them, that it will likely reoccur. But one of my question that I asked is was number four. So would be, do I have any obstruction? That was one thing that I asked, because oftentimes what they call a fecalate, which is a small a fecal stone. So right, so this is like a poop little stone that can get stuck at times, right? And basically, the appendix is like right by the ileocecal valve, which I learned also through my osteopath as well too. So basically, where the ileocecal valve, that the door that opens from the small intestine to the colon, was real nail close, really close. But my appendix actually was behind, so it could be like finicky for some people, but it serves a purpose. And so this is what I actually not argued, but I put my foot down, and I was like, wait a minute, there's research and new science and new things that comes out. So I think it does serve a purpose. But so I didn't have any fecalate or any fecal stones at all. So there was no obstruction. So I was like, well, that's good. She's like, so, and what is option one, which was antibiotic route? So, and then I asked, what are the risk of that and the risk of a reoccurrence or of not working? So my risk was so in my case, because it was not about to burst. So if it's about to burst, okay, that's a completely different story. But I was not there. This is why ask your questions first, and then you can make the proper judgment as far as what does work for you, what works for you, right? So follow your gut, always important. Don't follow fear, follow your gut, and ask questions, right? So this is what I did. And so I had 70% chance of full recovery from the antibiotic route. I'm like, okay. And then 30% it was not going to work. But and then the big thing, she's like, well, likelihood it might reoccur in about a year or so. I'm like, who are you to say? Like, there's reoccurrence. Absolutely, it happens, but maybe not. So I was like, okay. And so so I'm like, well, 70% is a pretty good chances. I'm like, I like that. So, and then I was like, well, if that does not work, the 30% chance this does not work, can I get the surgery done? She's like, yes. I'm like, oh, okay, perfect. So I basically made it a deal, made a pact with her. And this is why work with your physician, work with them. They're willing to work with you. If you're not going to just be arguing and this and that, just ask the question as you are entitled and as everybody should ask questions, right? Too quickly and over the years and over the past 5 years, what happened with COVID, which was all freaking nonsense. Never claimed that it didn't exist. That's not my point. But you should ask as somebody that has been impacted from being wanting to being full, well, somebody, an entity being wanting to force somebody to get a medical treatment that does not go or aligns with yourself, you should never do. Never, never. Nobody should force you to do anything against your own will. And there's times and places that some people might not be able to take the decision. And so the medical system will take that decisions based on their diagnosis of the case, right? Or whatever the case may be. So that's why I'm not opposed to reactive care, because yes, you need that care when in emergency. So, but nobody should ever tell you what to do. Period. As a self healer myself, as a health coach myself, never will I tell a client you need to do this or this will happen. I never operate out of fear. And I always lay it all out on the table to the best of my knowledge, and somebody can make a proper decision. As any medical treatment, you should have all the disclosure of the risk and the pros and the cons, and that should never be, anyways, I will not go down that road. That should be for another episode. But self-advocacy is always there, and being coerced into any treatment, this is wrong, period. I don't believe in that and should never have had happen, even in those past years at all. As we found out the pretty ugly truth around this. But anyways, so we move in. So this is the thing. So I decided to go to the antibiotic route, which they wanted me to stay in the hospital overnight. I was by myself, no family, no friends, like really close around. I could actually go to the house and get my stuff. And I was not in such pain that or under the influence of any drugs that could impair my driving because I drove back there and I didn't know that, I had appendicitis or whatnot, and that I would have had to stay overnight. So basically, I was able to deal with the doctor, and then we had to go compromise. Like, we just made a deal that I could go home for just a couple hours just so I can pack up some stuff and bring my things. Because let me tell you, sleeping in a hospital is not, it's the last place you really want to sleep. Because it's not a healing environment at all. The light is crazy. The amount of light, the sound, everything is just not in favor of healing at all. But I was like, I'm willing to do this so I can get monitored and get blood work the next day. That's what I did. I went home, packed up my things, got my grounding mat, which I have to share more about this, but I had a grounding pad that I brought with me. I brought my blue light blocking glasses. Sponsor, not necessarily a sponsor of this podcast. They are one of my affiliate, but Viva Rays, absolutely, they serve their purpose, super helpful in the hospital. So I had my blue light blocking glasses. I brought my little red light portable lamp. And I had a bunch of things, supplements, things that I don't recommend doing per se, but for me it was necessary. And so I was taking many other things at the same time too. So a lot of colloidal silver, non-medical advice here, but I took a hefty amount of colloidal silver, let me tell you. I think everybody should have this in their medical cabinet. They're like, herbal or, if you're your little homemade pharmacy DIY. So colloidal silver is applicable to anybody. So Sovereign Silver was one of them. Silver Biotics is the one that I was using. So I just took a good hefty amount of that. And many other things as far as gut microbiome goes. So this was really a thing. I went home, pack up, took all my things, got to the hospital, and I slept there over the night over that night. I was pretty exhausted by then because I literally had no sleep, about 4 hours. My HRV, so when I look at my O-ring, it was trash. You could see something was up. So this is something you could actually take a look at your O-ring and your as far as biofeedback to see how's your temperature. I didn't have fever or anything, so but it was just the pain, right? So, but it could tell that my body was like fighting something. So they got me before I went home, actually they gave me a whole bag of two different types of antibiotics. Can't recall what it was, but I actually asked them at the time. And not all antibiotics are actually, they're, as much as people will say, there's better ones and there's worse ones, which that one might be for another episode. But so I spent the night, got all myself hooked up with all my things and gadgets, and so I was able to get somewhat a good sleep. And the next day, I asked, number two, ask yourself for a retesting. This is what I did. So I told the nurse that night, can they do my blood work again in the morning? So I want to get my white blood cell count, my CRP. So the next morning, so my white blood cell count actually went down and dropped quite significantly, all the way to 6, if I recall. 6.9, 6.5 or something. So I'd have to go back. But significant drop. So that was really, really good for me. And then I had another bag of antibiotics also that morning. And then my CRP now went to 15. To 33. So this is so important, but then you don't freak out. But I'm like, okay. And I was telling the doctor, turns out she was French, which was super nice, and she was super kind to me, and she was really willing to work with myself. Um, and so I was like, okay, well, that's good. My CRP is high. I know there's acute inflammation right now, and my body is doing what it's intended to do. Inflammation is not bad per se. It's chronic inflammation. But in the acute phase, when you're ripping your muscle off, and this is why it's so important, when you do your blood work, you have to not work out for at least 3 days. And I had a client that did acro yoga for like a whole weekend, but even then, she did her blood work like 3 days later, and it was still some blood markers were off. And I'm like, wait a minute, what did you do? Like, you look like like, is your body tissues are breaking down right now or getting attacked by something? And so that was why. So this is why it's really important. And come into our community, I have the guidelines as far as like blood work as well too, what to do and what to ask for inside of our community. We have a bunch of guides in there too that you can download completely for free so that you can actually better self-advocate for yourself. And so got the blood work done and it was all good. So it was going in the right direction. So they were like, perfect. And that day I basically made another pact with them. Can I go home? As they wanted to monitor me for another full day. And when I got back that evening, so I went home, got a couple of things, I was really grateful because at first they were it was really, I didn't want to eat the food that was there because let me remind you that the food over the past 10 years of my last time being in hospital, the food has not got better in the hospital, and I cannot stomach how terrible it is. And the state of health that we are right now in hospital is, oh my God, it's mind-boggling. Let's just say this. This might be a longer episode, but that's okay. So speed this up and because this is something to really realize how terrible the healthcare system is, the state of it, and it's not getting better. So I'm like, you cannot hide your head in the sand and to think that, it's only going to get better. It's only going to get worse, period. So I don't want to be like the boogeyman, but I'm like, yeah, sorry, but you have to take care of your own health because nobody else will. Nobody is coming to save you, period. It does not matter what it is in your life. Nobody's coming to save you. So as much as, and when it comes to health, you are 100% responsible for your own health, not the doctor. The doctor is not responsible for your health at all. They're there to monitor in a case of acute phase, but it's not their responsibility. It's just is not, right? So we hope for proper care, absolutely. That they mean, there's a lot of great, amazing doctors, but also there's shady ones, like in any um career or doesn't matter what it is, there's always going to be a dark side to things, but this is why asking the right questions is really important and self-advocating so you can make the best decision. And so where I stayed over the night, they put me in the surgery um space, which there was about, I think, 14 stretchers, people pre and post hop. And so people that were going for surgery and people that would come back from surgery. And then I've seen the things like I was walking, like I was trying to get my steps in, at least my 10,000 steps in, even though I was there. And so I walked the aisles and the halls but I was like, it was wild. There was cases of Canada Dry and ginger ale and pop and juices. And, that morning, the breakfast was like, it was like some like shitty yogurt with full transparency because I was about to take it and they switched me to oral antibiotics the next morning. So that evening and then the next morning. So I wasn't sure my last time with antibiotics, it did not go really well. And I had this time around. So basically the blend of antibiotics they gave me was amoxicillin mixed with clavic something. So it's a different type of acid. Anyways, it's very common in some types of infection, even mononucleosis as well too. It's a really common. It's derived from penicillin. So I actually asked because they ask you. And I kind of freaked out the nurse. I'm like, oh, it's derived from penicillin. And her face just like changed. She's like, you're not allergic. Like she was about to give it to me. So she was, I'm like, no, 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 I'm good. I'm good. So I don't have, that could be really severe, right? So, but it's derived from mold, from penicillin. Like penicillin is derived from mold. So just, a lot of people don't know that, but could be an issue. But I did actually well, so I stomached pretty well. So I'm really, really grateful for that. Definitely, I was taking different types of probiotics to support during. So spore-based probiotics is one thing that I was taking. Saccharomyces boulardii was one of the treatment and things that I put myself on right away. And so as it was recommended actually by the doctors, like, that you could have some side effects. So here's a few things when it comes down to antibiotics, right? So especially those ones that I was taking, your increased risk of C. difficile, which is really common, and yeast overgrowth, candida. So which is really, and I've had a pass of C. difficile myself and Clostridium overgrowth as when I did a urinary organic acid test. Love, love, love that test. I'm so grateful because this has truly changed my life as far as finding out the root issue of what I was dealing with yeast overgrowth and bacterial overgrowth. So that was great. So the risk of C. diff is increases and loose stools and diarrhea, which can lead to some dehydration as well too. But in prevention to that, what I did was taking Saccharomyces boulardii, which is a yeast probiotic. It is not a bacterial probiotic, which does not get killed by antibiotics, which is perfect for during or post antibiotics, right? So a lot of people also there's different research that there could be issues with probiotics and reduce the recovery rate or the time of recovery. So for me, is I try to stick around with the yeast form and spore form, so soil-based probiotics. So this is what I did to help out with becoming for potential overgrowth. And the first thing you'll see of myself was the skin. My skin was screaming, especially on my face around if you do facial, not diagnostic, but facial mapping. So you can see around the nose, as the side, this is really in Ayurvedic medicine is really your or Chinese medicine is related to your intestinal tract, right? So digestive system. So I knew that my body was dealing with a lot of potential overgrowth. So it was getting pissed, of course, but also the antibiotics actually did quite well. It helped balance out some of my white blood cells that actually were quite imbalanced for a while. So maybe there was some disruption in the digestive system. So that did well. So this is what I did, along with making sure my nitric oxide levels were up as under infections or whatnot. Your nitric oxide gets used, and so I do took a lot of nitrates from Berkeley Life. That's one thing I took. I still took some colloidal silver, continued at home. Castor oil packs were some of the things that I did as well too, posts for recovery. So I did castor oil packs almost every night with some heat. With this heat bag on it, so to help out as well too. The last thing you would want to say, like, one thing I didn't do is you want to really give your body the chance to heal, so you need to conserve energy. So I did not do sauna. I tried one ozone bath. You wouldn't want to overtly do this because I have a ozone bubbler. So it's pretty easy. So I was able to put it in the bath, like not the ozone machine in the bathtub. No, don't do this. You'll get electrocuted. You don't want to do that. But I put the ozone connection, so which is a stone, so that goes inside the water with a little cord. So I did that. Actually, I think it did help. So obviously, I kind of threw a sink at it. So I don't say that you should just do all that, but some of these things that I really did, I wanted to make sure that my digestion also, so a bit more fasting as well at that time, because the last thing you want is more inflammation inside the digestive tract or, raw foods and these things that could actually disturb the appendix or the colon or whatnot. So, and I wanted to make sure that things keep moving. So to prevent constipation as well too. So I did increase bits of some fiber as well too, but I stayed more on the smoothie side, soup, broth, these things as well too. So I did some bone broth as well too. It can raise your histamine and it did a bit with me, but this is why when at least you can, I take some DAO enzyme, which helps break down histamines as well too, and I'm more prone genetically. So I know that, and you have to make sure that your detoxification, like your methylation, which a lot of people have issues and struggle with, and you can see this with methylation issues. Simply test your homocysteine levels, and you will be able to tell and see if it's above 8, so 9, 10 up. That means, yeah, you do have some methylation imbalances and would need some help for sure. But yeah, so this is what I did when home as far as home care. So they discharged me the next day and I went back home and everything was good. So when they retested my blood work the following morning, it was 15. My CRP was 15 and my white blood cells came back completely optimal ranges in the 4.5 if I recall. It was really, really good. So I knew that the antibiotics were working. And so I went home. I still felt a bit of inflammation. So about a week after being on antibiotics, and I tried not to overthink about it, but definitely like avoiding too much like solid food is really important. Things that are rich in lectins. Um, you want to really help and nourish the gut microbiome. This is really important, and then it's not always ideal to do it during the time of your when you're on antibiotics. But I would still, consider I would still consume, tubers and root vegetables that would cook easy, like potatoes or whatnot, sweet potatoes. But it really depends on how well you tolerate it. Especially, you could have a lot of fermentation when you do increase your resistant starch during that time. So just easy digestion, aloe vera, either like even the plant that you could take into like a nice drink with mineral water. So a lot of minerals, a lot of vitamins, vitamin D, vitamin A. So those are the things that I took sublingual into their emulsified form. So there's already semi pre-digested, pre-broken down, a lot easier. Vitamin D is really important to reduce inflammation, especially in the intestinal tract, and help fight inflammation. It helps, right? So it helps reduce the one of the cytokine called NF-kappa B, which can lead to a lot of intestinal damage in excess. And so vitamin A is really important also for the intestinal tract. And producing especially immunoglobulins IgA, which are specifically in the intestinal lining. And so yeah, so this is some of the treatments that I did. And I did not go off my script as far as like my my list of things in order. Um, but overall, yes. So my experience in the hospital, definitely self-advocating for yourself was really important. And that treatment that actually they offered me for nausea, it's called Zypan. So Zypan I did not take. So because it was for nausea, which I did not have and did not need. So just Toradol was really the one that I did. But I do tolerate most medicine, most drugs, as far as my phase one liver detoxification, knowing my genetics, which is really handy to know because some people actually have a slow metabolism of NSAIDs or Tylenol or it could be anesthetics. Oh my God. Oh, wow. It's just anyways, when they put you under. So I'm losing the thought, but that's okay. So this is really important. So if you are somebody that is more sensitive to this because you know your genetics, it could be super helpful. And I think this should be a standard in hospital. I wish eventually, hopefully. So but yeah, so again, now I want to touch base on like what does the appendix do, right? So we're told that the appendix is something that we don't really need. It's just there. But no, it actually serves a purpose. These surgeries, appendectomy has been done for like a decades, and so a long time. I think it's over 100 years. I think it was when I read it was about 130 years. But don't quote me. But it's been multiple decades that the surgery's been performed, right? And so it's really important to understand because they actually have not changed much like procedures. So I'm like, well, and the research comes out, as far as the appendix, right, and functions. So a few things on the appendix. The role of the appendix, so it's really part of the immune system. So it's specifically with the gut associated lymphoid tissue, GALT, what we call GALT, so GALT. So it's basically GALT is like a collection of immune cells that are found inside the lining of the gut, right? So it acts like as the body's first line of defense, monitoring what enters the digestive system, and it helps us like in responds accordingly to harmful pathogens like bacteria and viruses and whatnot inside the digestive system. And so the appendix is really rich in that GALT. And so it helps regulate our immune systems and our immune response and prevent overreaction to like unless substances in the gut. So example, or and produce a lot of IgA, immunoglobulins, which is so important. And so this is why for me, just chopping something off was just not something that this sit well with myself, right? I've seen so many like clients getting their gallbladder removed, which is a very, very lucrative business. There's over 1 million removal of gallbladder every year in the United States. Canada, I don't know the data. But I'm just like, no, we're just so quick to go to the knife. And again, gallbladder removal in so many cases is it's the most important thing because if it explodes, it's a no bueno as well too. So, and if that's where you're at, that's where you're at. That's it. You don't, So it's really important to also seek medical emergency help when in times that we need. So as well as this is really important, right? So IgA production is so crucial. We need those antibodies to fight leaky gut, lipopolysaccharide, so which lipopolysaccharide LPS is these type of endotoxins, so inside toxins inside our body that our body produces as well from the food we consume, the our environment we live in, toxins exposure, all of that leads to increasing a lot of LPS, right? So, and so it's really, really important. So we need those antibodies to fight that and neutralize those harmful bacteria and lead to dysbiosis. So that is really important. Also, so one of the other things, the appendix as it serves like it's like a bacterial reservoir, right? So it's like a little sac that just holds on to good, healthy bacteria that helps recolonize the flora of the colon, especially like post antibiotics as well too, but also like post like if you have like diarrhea and these type of things. So it helps recolonize. So this is something that preserving your appendix is something that for myself definitely is something that I was just like, no, I wanted to keep it as much as I possibly can. Unless if I was in a case that it was about to burst, which was not. So this is why you have to be nice and clear and ask your questions. If it's not the case, then you can choose, right? So if you rather go down surgery, go down the surgery. That's okay. But no, also there's things, right? So you want to make sure that, in my personal humble opinion, is if you have your appendix removed, you have to make sure that you do take care of your intestinal tract, right? So you're gonna have to make sure you're on top of it, right? So you got to make sure you're on top of your digestive health. And so especially post appendix removal in my case. In some cases, some ugly stories that I started listening to podcasts, and some lady had her appendix removed, but because they left a small amount of it, she had a recurring infection, which actually the big thing is your lifestyle matters. I have a pretty healthy lifestyle. Stress will matter. And when you look at the emotional side of appendicitis, is also the resistance of the flow of life. And so it could be lead to anger, bitterness, resistance. And personally, which I will be more public when that comes. But been navigating things that yes, that led to a lot more anger and some resentment and these type of things that I was like, okay. And it just happened after that. So I was like, okay, so it's a mixture of everything. But in my case, in my humble opinion for myself, it was heavily emotionally driven. So you can't deny emotions. Emotions um yeah, do leads to sickness. Stress does affect people. It does affect many, many things in the body, especially your digestion. So if you're stressed and your body is always in this fight or flight mode, man, oh man, it's like you're a zebra but getting ran and by running away from a lion. You're his next meal. And so your digestion goes to trash because this is the last thing that your body, when you're running for your life, you're always in this fight or flight mode. Your body, the last thing it cares about is peeing and pooping and digesting. So it's just run for your life. We want to make sure that you're safe and you get there in one piece. So that's exactly what happens when we are stressed, right? So having a lot of grounding, I think it's really important, and supporting your sleep, really important. So that's why part of it healing. But really, this is really important as far as I think the appendix, I do believe it does serve a purpose, despite what we are being told or have been told. So I decided to keep it as much as I possibly could. I was able to full recovery. I feel great. Uh, so post antibiotics, which was a 14-day round, So now basically I am on a gut protocol. So a lot of the things that I teach in our free school community, so a lot of red phenols, resistant starch that I introduce a specific form of what we call sun fiber, which is the modified guar gum. Really, really good for making sure that you have proper peristalsis and bowel movement. So, right, so we don't want anything stuck, you know. So I made sure of that. So this is a great add-in. Most people do really well because it is something that can promote bowel movement, and it can also and prevent constipation and also solidify stools. So it could go either way. So if somebody actually has either loose stools or too firm, then it will help you bring that back to balance, right? Compared to things like psyllium husk. For some people, it could be too bulky. It can make you constipated, or it can make you having too loose of stools, which is not so good. So you don't want that. And also now, so I'm still on Saccharomyces boulardii, and I'm taking spore-based probiotics as well too. So Subtilis and Colossi is the two strains that I'm using right now, along with a quite therapeutic dose. This is really important. Therapeutic dose, I cannot shy away enough from that because it's really important. Not medical advice, but for me, is like you got to take proper dosages for effectiveness. And so I'm thinking like double the dosages, at least a bare minimum. I think like 10 billions of Saccharomyces boulardii. I think is really, really helpful. But I'm taking more in the upper 20 is what I'm taking right now. And it's been doing well. And also one of the amazing, oh my gosh, triple probiotic therapy is really, really amazing. And so I actually introduced full transparency. Seeking Health sent me a bottle of electrolytes, but also a bottle of the Histamine X probiotics, which is a only bifidobacteria species, which I didn't want to take it the during the time I was on antibiotics because bacterial probiotics like lactobacillus and bifidobacteria species do easily get killed from antibiotics. I just don't want to mess around with too much with that. But lactobacillus, the problem with some of these strains drive histamines. And so this one is specifically, it drives bifidobacteria species. It's a bifido blend that basically just feeds bifidobacteria that helps break down histamines. And I cannot, once I introduced that as well too, I was like, wow, the change in digestion and bowel, it's just been amazing. I'm just like, you know, I was chatting with a great friend of mine, and this is really, if you want to understand the health and the state of your digestive system, how's your poop? Take a look at your poop. It's so important. If it's mushy, it's all over, it's just you're not digesting your food, you see a lot of food particles in there, that's an issue. And you can test blood markers as well too to understand how's your liver gallbladder, which can impact a lot of your digestive system. Some of these key liver and pancreatic enzymes that are really, really important to test: lipase, amylase, your digestive capacity, gastrin hormone is so important. I have to make another podcast on this. As far as like your hydrochloric acid levels. But introducing this Histamine X probiotics, which I'll put it in the show note as well too. You get 10% off anything at Seeking Health. So good. I was quite blown away as well too, which you could drive commensal bacteria, bifidobacteria, with a lot of the protocols from the immunity code, but also in the what is in the school community. You can find that 10-day gut protocol, the gut reset protocol that is inspired by my great mentor, Joel Green. So that is really important. So this is what I'm doing right now. And then also introducing a lot of immunoglobulin IgG, which are really derived from serum bovine, so blood, but it's just the extraction of the immunoglobulins, which is really, really rich to support the clearance of bad bacteria like LPS. And so this is what I'm taking right now, along with another intestinal tract blend called GI Revive. And so that has a different blends of, it has a little bit of glutamine. I don't say glutamine is ideal for everybody. There can be some sensitivity with that as far as like neurological or too much excitement as far as driving glutamic acid in the brain. So it can make some people feel worse when they take glutamine. So I do like to give like glycines and all these other substrate to help first. In small amount, most people will do well, but it really depends from a person to person. But aloe, there's a blend of aloe, zinc carnosine in there, which is really important to heal the intestinal tract as well too. So it's a multi blend product, and yeah, I believe this is what I'm on right now. Vitamin D, vitamin A, and just like B vitamins and nitric oxides. Those are the things that I just maintain. And it's been great. Digestion has been absolutely phenomenal. So I'm really glad about that too. So far it's been really good. But this is my recovery journey right now. And all this to, as far as my recovery and my reflection, I think, opting for being more conservative as far as the treatment that you're choosing, it is your own right. And you should ask all the questions to make the right decision. So this is um, you know, as I reflected and as far as like closing thoughts, I think understanding the state of health that we are in right now, the last place you would like to be is in the hospital. So I always tell the doctors, I said, this is the last place I want to be. And, I really, oh yes, I wanted to mention about what I did as far as like, my follow-up as well too. So I actually requested, a requisition from my nurse practitioner, as I personally, obviously, try to get a doctor, but I have, which I will be following up really soon with the surgeon doctor. But my nurse practitioner actually sent me for an ultrasound. So ultrasound is really non-invasive. It's amazing. There's no radiation. And so when they did it, so the thing with diagnosing appendicitis with it's really rare that they do a diagnosing with appendicitis with ultrasound because most people are in too much pain. But if they do, like basically for myself, it went down to 8 millimeter last time, so that was really really good. But unless if it was inflamed, likely they wouldn't even be able to tell. And so this is what the ultrasound tech told me. So I was like, okay, well, I might get another one. We'll see. But so far, I'm really feeling great. Blood work is looking in the right direction. So I'm like really, really pleased with that, which I will be retesting blood work shortly. So I like to do it every 3 months. But last blood work was about, a good chunk of blood that was taken. So as far as more something more comprehensive. So I'll be following up in a couple months or so, in a month or so, I'll probably just do a little follow up, and then yeah, so this is the biggest thing. So I think working with a nurse practitioner is really important as far as being able to get what you want in treatment. So this is one of my big things. So, but yeah, and closing really, and to really recap this, really the importance of self-advocacy, right? Self-advocate for yourself, ask questions, feel free, don't be intimidated, learn, read, ask questions, always, always, always. In 2025 coming up, please, I'm like, this is one thing I think if we learn over the past many years is to self-advocate for yourself and to ask questions and to not feel bad about it. All right. So don't feel being gaslit. That's okay. It's okay. You know, most of it is self-reflection. And again, yeah, and the appendix, underestimated the role in health, which I think, this is sad in some ways, but once you learn, you empower yourself, you know that yes, organs actually serve a purpose. So before just removing something, I like to ask questions. And the other thing is trusting your own instinct, your own intuition, um, is really important. So don't doubt yourself. When you just pause for a moment, you really normally we always find the answer within ourselves, and we just need sometimes some solo guidance from listening to podcasts and these things. And this has been my journey of self-discovery and self-healing myself, right? So and then yes, so I really invite you to share. I'd love to know your feedback as well with this episode and what resonated, and I hope this finds value to anybody because most people actually you know, start learning after, but we kind of want to know before. So share this with anybody that you think that this would help. And I really, really appreciate this. And I'll put everything in the show notes. And welcoming into the community. Come on in the community. It's a free space called, and the platform that we use is School. Skool. So School, and there's a lot of. My goal in 2025 is also is my way of giving back. Is you know what would I do if I was to start my new journey in this health space, and there's so many things that I would do. And so this is exactly what I'm teaching. This is exactly I'm giving the tools. What should we focus on in 2025, which I think doing an episode on that will be a good thing. That would be a really important thing as far as what to focus to energy and where to invest in your health. So it's really important. There's a lot to do. But this is a wrap. And thank you again for listening and share this with anyone. And on this note, we'll see you on the next episode. Thank you. Thank you so much for joining me on this episode of the RegenBiome podcast. If you enjoyed the show, please remember to leave us a 5-star review on iTunes, because that's what helps us to be heard and to be seen. If you'd like to connect with me directly, or seeking private one-on-one health coaching, or if you have any questions about this episode, please reach out to me directly through my website, RegenBiome.com, or on Instagram at JeanFelixCircot_JFT. Thanks again, and I look forward to seeing you on the next episode.